Hey, everybody. Welcome, Hunt Club Podcast, Cyber Minds Edition. um, Another great one, another great guest, another great legend of cybersecurity in the Vectraverse. Um, Bastian from Helvetia. I'd love to hear you introduce yourself to the listeners, the watchers, the Hunt Club followers. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi Wash. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, Bastian Schäfer, my name. I'm head of group cyber defense at Helvetia Insurances. And Helvetia is an insurance company originated in Switzerland but active in all over Europe. Well, and that's what we're going to talk about. Reality is a bit more complex. And I'm responsible that business goes on
Yeah,
if the cyber attacks are hitting us.
yeah. I love. We talked. Yeah, we met at the Hunt Club conference. You gave a talk at Vectra's Hunt Club user conference in, oh gosh, remind me. Was it in Munich? No, Berlin.
It was in Berlin, actually. Yeah.
Berlin. Yes, last year. Um, and you gave a talk that like resonated with me, and I'm like, I've got to have you on the show to have this to talk more in depth about the SOC being a cybersecurity center of excellence. Um, and I wanted to pick your brain on that. And the kind of the first question I have is, you know, you had just talked about or just mentioned business goes on, right? And um, in your world, tell us a little bit about the challenge with that notion that business must go on, and the role of the SOC as you see it as the center of excellence. Like, what brought you to that realization?
Yeah, so I think I had a challenge, many of us have. I mean, business comes to you, the executive board or someone, and says, hey, we have a cyber risk. Cyber is significant for us as a business. What do we do?
Yeah,
And that happened to me a couple of years ago, and I said, gosh, okay, now we need group wide somehow, grasp on that cyber risk, on how should we do it. And our understanding, as a company, and also, you try to keep it simple on who you are as a company. And our understanding always is we are an insurance company active in Europe, but we looked at it. I mean, it's not a secret. It's in our report, financial report by the end of the year, how our business works. And it's in fact much more complicated. So we are not only active in Europe, we are active in Africa, Asia Pacific, Singapore. And we have an office in New Caledonia, Americas. Also, our business is quite diverse. We have 120 companies in the group, not only doing financial services. I mean, we are producing hygiene products. We have hospitals in Spain. So a lot of businesses where you cannot do cybersecurity as you would in a financial organization. So we really had to think about how can we handle, the risk that we have as a business coming from cyber attacks. And that required a more modern approach than, what you would typically implement with your traditional SOC, where you centralize everything and your
yeah,
idea is completely centralized.
yeah,
So that led us to really also talk to business and say, and first of all, try to make, try to raise understanding that a cyber attack cannot be avoided. That yes, one pillar of our entire security strategy needs to be that we need to have preventive measures. I mean, that's important. Try to avoid it, but also be clear that if something happens, we shouldn't ask, why did it happen? I mean, it will happen at some point. And we need to have measures in place that ensure that IT processes or digitalized business processes can keep delivering their goals and targets despite a successful attack. And we really tried to explain security operations in a way that, it's not your technical silo that looks at alerts all day, but it's really a central organization that develops those capabilities in the entire organization to keep delivering despite
You
compromise.
you you had used the analogy of the SOC or the center of excellence, right? As
Yeah.
given the complexity of your environment, of your business, the need for, I'll throw the resilience word out there, business continuity. You said you had referred to the role of the center of excellence, the SOC, as the conductor, right?
Mm.
Like similar to like in an orchestra. Tell me, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what
Mm.
conductor? What is that? What does that image in your head of like being the conductor look like?
Yeah. I mean, for us, that's kind of the natural evolution of what we all understand under a SOC. So when I had the challenge of establishing it in the group, I also not only looked at the company, but I also looked at, what do our peers understand from a SOC, and what was the evolution. And then if you look at it, I mean, in the beginning, it was very network focused security, right? Like 20, 30, 40 years ago. So all the idea of security came from your network operation centers that would predate your SOC. And at some point, especially in the financial organizations, that entire dynamic came a more compliance-driven dynamic, where the regulators say, "Hey, cool that your network admins are doing security, but you need to have control over it." That's where the CISOs emerged. You had policies, and the policy said what IT should do to keep it secure. And then at some point, that's how how we would observe it. Business became interested because it was not only a compliance issue, but actually something business threatening, and business said, "Hey, guys, we need an answer for that for that risk." And that answer was, yeah, we establish a centralized security operation center, and that felt like your superhero organization. And I mean, also for us security guys, right? It felt pretty great. I mean, we are the superheroes. If there's a cyber attack, you have a central team that knows exactly, how that cyber attack works, what needs to be done in the organization to fight it off, to protect your systems. Um, that's, from a marketing perspective, a great idea to sell
Oh,
to your
what a
board.
great internal brand. I mean,
Yeah, and
I'm a big believer in like how do you build the internal brand of the security organization, right? Because I don't know if people realize the amount of some people do, but like appreciate the level of expertise and creative thinking and problem solving that goes on within and the intelligence that's built into that organization and that brand internally, shift it from, kind of uh I love the superhero thing, but superheroes arrive when things go bad, but a center of excellence, a center of intelligence is there when things are good and bad. Like it
mm,
enables and this idea of the conductor. I love that. I love that analogy because it's like we talked about you have guiding principles as to what that means, and we can talk about this center of excellence and your views on proactive versus reactive security, right?
mm,
Offensive security versus defensive security, or the combination of the both and how you balance that
yeah.
in a center of excellence. But what, I mean, in super complex environment, constantly under attack, attacks will happen. Are you ready for them? Like what's the, what's the kind of the pillars of your strategy
Mm.
in order to achieve that? In order to be the superheroes, both proactively and reactively.
I'm fully agree with you. Building a brand is very important. I mean, you need a value proposition, but you really need to have the right brand. And I mean, also, we see it with our industry peers, and we thought maybe the superhero brand is not the right one because, let's be honest, we probably cannot deliver on that. You cannot have that one central team that knows it all, can do it all, is always there, is always informed. So we really rebranded it, and we said, hey, we need to understand centralized security not as something where we centralized at a place or where we centralize responsibilities within one team, but we really centralize expertise. We centralize orchestrating and working with the organization to build capabilities to be resilient to cyber attacks. That we centralize, but the capabilities and execution itself we federate to the different service owners, IT service owners, and so on. So in the end, I mean, it's really more like a conductor of an orchestra, where the idea of the conductor is not that he plays all the instruments. He really works with the orchestra, so that on the big day when they have their, the when they're playing for the audience, in principle they could play without the conductor. Wouldn't be, that great maybe, but I mean, for most of us it would sound pretty good. And that's kind of the vision that we have, that we in principle enable the situation in times of the organization in times of peace to handle and keep the organization alive, even if the bad times happen.
Yeah.
And they will happen.
You
So
yeah, go ahead.
the conductor really for us is a time beater, a teacher, and a leader. Also for security aspects. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I imagine much like a conductor or an orchestra, you look for the best musicians in that orchestra, right?
Yeah.
And I love the whole idea of federated. Like you have, like all the musicians don't live in the security organization; they live across the business, right? And we talked about in the past how you've organized around competence clusters, like a security competency, relative to these musicians in the orchestra. Talk to me a little bit more about what do you mean by, these competence clusters, right?
Mhm.
What methodologies, approaches, characteristics do you look for in
Mhm.
your quote unquote musicians?
So, I mean, in the end, we have established end-to-end responsibility with the service owners for the security of their services, meaning every service owner for his or her service is really responsible also to operate it securely. Because we think, security is a lot of security is actually basic IT hygiene task. I mean, have a look at your systems. Are they behaving as you would expect? Patch them, securely configure them, have an eye on the secure configuration. But the point is, you cannot simply shoot those tasks out in the organization, right? You need to orchestrate and verify them. And for these orchestration and verification tasks, I mean, we have established those 3 competence clusters that you mentioned. And to put it simple, we have the classical approach, where we have those, I always call it low frequency controls. And that's your classical information security, or what you know as classical information security. You have your policies, and then once a year you have your assessments verifying that the organization is actually adhering to the policies. But in parallel, what really is new is that we also establish high frequency controls, so highly data driven analytics, ensuring that the operational security tasks that our service owners have are actually effective. So we have these cyber risk controls that are continuously monitoring on a risk level. If the risk goes up somewhere in the organization and the risk goes up, we automatically approach the service owners and ask them, hey, what do we need to do right now to keep it down? And more importantly, I mean, if the risk went up, there was some deficiency, right, on a process level or on a technical level. We really try to figure that out and improve that.
How I
And that
Go ahead, go ahead. You had just said something that popped in my head, but I'll let you finish your thought.
and that dynamic, between the operational teams and the security teams, that then really helps to, well, first of all, it's resilient because, we factor in mistakes and non-optimal processes. And it really is a learning engine for the entire organization when it comes to cybersecurity.
I think what you're describing, our friends at Gartner describe as continuous threat exposure management. This idea of constant, continuous understanding of your exposure. But the way you think about it is not necessarily across the entire business, but by business unit. Because and what popped in my head from a question was you used the word dynamic, and I was thinking risk in and of itself is dynamic, and the risk tolerance of different business units is probably dynamic. So, for example, and I want to get your thoughts on how you deal with this ever changing, you know, ever changing risk across individual business units or lines of business or service providers inside the company. Is like, take for example, if you're launching a new product, right? The product organization is launching a new product or service. um, Leading up to that launch, or you're acquiring a company. Merger and acquisition is another trigger where risk tolerance ebbs and flows. Like, now our risk tolerance is extremely low because we are about to launch a product. So this can't get out competitively, or we're acquiring this company, this can't be leaked. How are you, adjusting, managing those ebbs and flows and risk tolerance, risk levels?
I mean, if we have a change in the company, might be an IT project, might be a merger, there's always security people with the operational people that are responsible for doing the change. Yeah. And our information security organization, they really ensure security by design. So they really think about what do we need to do that nothing happens. And our cyber defense organization, they work with a project manager or whoever is managing the change to identify cyber threats and design the processes so that they're resilient to cyber threats, so that they still work even if there's a compromise. And this double-pillared approach, is what ensures that we can really steer the risk, the ever-changing risk.
Yeah. And I'm assuming security is brought in early in those discussions, right? Not after decisions
Exactly.
are made, like as part of the strategy building, as part of, like, as early as
from the get-go.
And yeah, we've always argued this is like, how do you get, this dates back years, and maybe it's not as big as a problem as it used to be, but maybe it is like, does security have the seat at the table as these business decisions are being made and these strategy decisions are being made? Because as you're building a product or engaging in a merger and acquisition or whatever, an IT project, whatever it might be, it's imperative that security is ahead of the game, right? Is in those discussions. And it sounds like that's happening at your organization, which is fantastic. Because I think of, and I'm going to get back to, like, center of excellence and security brand, right? I think of, when you think about the SOC, traditionally, maybe not at your organization because you've made these steps to kind of build an orchestra with a conductor, so to speak, is this notion of how does let me ask you this. I'm trying to find the right words to say this, but what's the traditional definition of the security operations center outside of your own brand? Like, what do you think when people say security operations center, what does the executive line of business, what do people think of a security operations center is?
My impression, I mean, and certainly that's not true for all the organization, but a lot of people I talk to is really the security operations center centralizes the operational security tasks of your company. So each service owner, they care about functionality, cost, that their customers are happy about the IT services they provide. But when it comes to security, well, that's your centralized security operations center. I mean, they are looking at, and it might be their responsibility that your systems are operated in a secure way, configured in a secure way, patched in a secure way. If there's an antivirus running on your service, it's them centrally looking at it and taking care of it. And I mean, I gave a talk like last week or 2 weeks ago, and someone from the audience in a break came to me and asked, so in your organization, he asked me, who's responsible, if security on a service goes wrong? So if an IT service is configured securely. And I said, well, it's the service owner, the operational security, the operational responsibility. And he looked at me with very big eyes and he said, well, in our organization, it's only security. And I asked him, but who is in control of an IT system? Who can actually decide about how it's engineered, how it's designed, how it's operated? And he said, well, the service owner. I said, exactly. And therefore, he's also in control of the security. So you really need to tie it together
Yeah.
to have also these self-controlling systems,
Yeah.
I mean, if you just give them the competencies but not the responsibilities, you have two streams that divert at some point. Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of people view security as a technology function?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I see. So a lot of companies, security is still a pure IT task,
Yeah.
especially cybersecurity. That's seen as someone is looking at your antivirus alerts and maybe analyzing phishing. There's a bad URL or domain in there, and then configuring the email security gateways. I mean, don't get me wrong; those are all tasks that need to be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
But the actual value exists if you understand the threat for your business and then also work with the business processes that are affected by a phishing. Because 99% of the phishing emails, as an example, they're not really relevant. That's the noise.
Yeah.
You can filter that out on technical levels. You're interested in that maybe 0.1% that actually affects your business. And then the domains in there, they are secondary. Then you want to talk about business impact. What is actually the damage to our business?
Yeah.
And you need to ensure that you have all the capabilities, the technological capabilities on a pure technical level, so that there's someone that can identify a phishing, that can configure an email gateway, but also someone who understands the business and what is the threat actor actually trying to do, and how is he manipulating our business processes. And that's cyber defense,
Yeah.
in total, not only the technical aspect.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that I think the definition of the SOC tends to be very technical in nature, and granted, it is. There's a technical aptitude and competency, and cyber attacks obviously involve or lead with have a technology first kind of approach to them. But I would argue the SOC, from a branding perspective, is more of a source of intelligence for the organization than anything. Like it,
Mhm.
in terms of managing risk, in terms of understanding the risk, whether you're rolling out a product, what we had just talked about. And I wanted to ask you, we're going off, I'm not gonna call it script, but we're going, like, we haven't talked about this in the past, but I wanted to pick your brain with this notion of intelligence, and is the SOC the center of excellence? Is this central intelligence group that is really understanding and ahead of you know um, you know risk exposure, threats, emerging threats in the wild, et cetera, et cetera. Um, where does AI fit in that world for you? Like, how are you leveraging AI to enable not necessarily the technology be better, but the musicians in the orchestra to be, to harness their talent? Like, where do you see that? How are you using it today? Where do you see it going?
Yeah. I mean, it is what you said, it's in the end, your SOC or Center of Cyber Excellence should be a threat-driven organization based on threats, producing threat intelligence, and threat intelligence is information in context of your business, and then being the engine of transforming on how your business works so that it's more resilient. And for that, you need to understand your threats. And we use AI for doing threat intelligence and understanding what is the context to our business. I mean, not only that there's a threat out there, we need to understand, does it affect us, and in what way does it affect
Yeah.
us? Who is responsible? Who do we need to collaborate with? And then obviously, that's also where Vectra is very important to us in doing signal intelligence, in actually understanding not only anomalies, but setting anomaly in context
Yep.
to the importance of the business processes, to other signals in the organization, and then actually presenting risk scores to us.
And I think
And
yeah, I mean, it's funny because you're like, hey, thanks for the plug. You didn't have to do that, but we often talk about our three C's: coverage, clarity, and control, and it's it's building a center of excellence. And you talked about this, right? It's like the need for a modern approach beyond network security, right? So we would call that, in the complexity of your environment. So as there's like, that's the notion of visibility, which we call coverage, right? Do you have this massive attack surface covered? Do you have the ability to detect threats across this massive attack surface? You talked about the notion of control, right? Can we take the steps, whether that's low fidelity, high fidelity, taking control of attack? That's the ability to contain it, stop it, right? Learn from it, evolve your methodologies, processes, people, et cetera, et cetera. But it's funny how in security, we always talk about visibility and control. For years, you guys have been told, you need visibility and control, visibility and control. And in a SOC that is the center of excellence, what I hear from you, and I'm going to read this back to you and hear if you agree. The missing component, which a lot of security organizations, maybe they don't evaluate technology this way, or their processes, or their people, is the actual contextualization of the attack, right?
Mhm.
Like, what does it mean? What's happening? How are they doing? The context is that missing third pillar in the middle, which we call clarity. So it's just like, you can
Mhm.
have all the visibility in the world, you can buy all the controls and implement all the controls in the world, but if you lack clarity as to what's really happening and the impact on your environment, that context, visibility and control doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. And that's exactly, and you can get that context and clarity on the one hand, again with a technological answer, AI and so on. But what was really key for us is that federating
Yeah,
aspect. We federate it out to the expert teams that actually operate an IT service, and they exactly know,
yeah,
the technology, the solution, and they know the business processes they're supporting with that.
and they know
And
it.
with that, we really pull in
Yeah,
context,
and
and
that's
understanding.
and for them to be able to do their job, for you to be able to federate, right? You have a center
Yeah.
of excellence, but then you're distributing responsibility to the business owners, the service owners, in order for them to not only understand threats to their service, but then take responsibility for keeping the business, that service running. They need context to do that. They need
Yeah.
intelligence from you guys in order for them to make the right decisions, right? And make those calls.
And you cannot only federate it, like the conductor, you need to listen who is off key
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
orchestra, and then you need to respond to it. I mean, even if that musician is responsible to play correctly, I mean, you need to hear it. Or if the pace is not correct anymore, and then you can adjust.
yeah.
And also for, in real world that is not listening to off key, but that it's analyzing massive data. And for that we also leverage AI.
Awesome. God, I could talk to you we got a whole bunch of other topics potentially to talk about, but I love this notion of like rebranding the SOC as a center of excellence, as the, central intelligence unit for the organization, for the lines of business when it comes to threats or risks to the organization, enabling resilience, right? Both pre and post compromise, both proactively and reactively, etc. I'm going to challenge you. This was a great conversation. Thank you again for coming on. I'm going to challenge you. I do this at the end of Cyber Minds. 3 things, right? I've got 5 things written down. I got to narrow it down to 3, but I would love you to like say, if you want to if you want to embrace what you guys have done at Helvetia, what 3 things, 3 pieces of advice would you give your peers?
Yeah. So certain, I mean, and that's kind of boring, but it's manage expectation. Don't promise, wrong value that you cannot deliver. And I'm looking at the superhero. Don't paint the picture of a superhero because, frankly, we are all not superheroes. but we can be a conductor. Federate, orchestrate, verify rigorously. That would be my second point. Simply to lend responsibilities where skills and competences reside. And well, the last point is my first point. Don't be a lonely superhero. Because if you don't make that false expectation, you have much more people you can collaborate with, and it's not all on your shoulders.
Love it.
It's more efficient and more effective in the end.
Yeah, love it. That's great. God, I want to talk to you more about superhero and that whole mindset, because I think a lot
No,
of
it's cool if you establish yourself as a superhero. It's
there's
definitely
so much
sexy.
superhero branding in
Also,
security.
it's so much pressure putting on you, and it's actually providing false value claims to the business.
Yeah, love it. Bastian, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much. We got to have you back on. I know you're a busy person. This means the world to us to have you on the show. Everybody, if you liked what you heard, comment, like it, debate some of the things we talked about, challenge us, throw different topics at us. I'll throw them at Bastian, see if he's interested in bantering about it with me. But Bastian, thanks again. This was great. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Hunt Club Podcast, Cyber Minds. Thanks everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.